Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, so here we are, and we are going to preview, or we're going to talk about some large dudes hitting a fussy ball for the next few minutes. And as you can see, since my last preview video, I've become pretty large dude myself, and we're going to have a chill late night stream. I'm kind of frustrated about a couple of things that I will not get into, but we're going to have our draft of choice (PBR), despite some people's derisation of a perfectly good draft. And as you can see, it's white, blue, and red, which is maintaining the theme of the Grand Slam we're going to be talking about today. It's the Open, as John McEnroe and his fellow commentators insist on calling it, and we're going to be previewing the Open, the men's section, and we're going to talk about some predictions as well. Hopefully, I don't ramble too much as we go along the predictions. So I'm going to, as usual, go from on paper the least likely guy to win it to the most likely guy to win it, and it's going to be the contenders. And we're going to talk about some narratives that have been going on, largely from my memory. So it could be unreliable. I might have to look up a couple of things. My memory is not what it was. I've been trying to follow this stuff as closely as possible. And the hardcourt season is by far the American hardcourt swing is by far my least favorite one of the lot. The reason being that all these tournaments seem a bit homogeneous to me. The blue courts, the ball. I mean, like what I mean by that is, like when you go from Queens to Wimbledon, there's a different atmosphere and a different feel to Wimbledon. Or when you go from Rome to Roland Garros, Roland Garros is Roland Garros. But when you go from Cincinnati to U.S. Open, um, I genuinely cannot tell you how the U.S. Open feels special. It's by far my least favorite Grand Slam. It isn't helped by the fact that people yell, people scream in between points, happens all the time. However, I think just before I was majorly into the sport, which is 2003, 2004. Just before that, like when it was Pete Sampras and Andre Agassi ruling the tennis world, I think the U.S. Open used to be almost as important as Wimbledon, is what I'm told by my dad. So um, here we are. Anyway, so let's get underway. The final Grand Slam of the year, and the fifth most likely of the available players to be winning it, in my opinion, is this guy, Yannick freaking Sinner. Yannick Sinner has had a very interesting build up to the U.S. Open. So if I remember right, Yannick Sinner, I think he kind of suffered some sort of early exit in in Montreal. He lost to Pablo Carreno Busta. First of all, in Wimbledon, we all know what happened with Novak Djokovic. Um with Novak Djokovic, he completely had a commanding start, and then it was ruined by um, one of those typical Novak comebacks from nowhere. And Yannick Sinner went out in the, was it the quarterfinal or the semifinal? I can't. It was, yeah, the quarterfinal, because he played Alcaraz in the fourth round, and Djokovic played Yannick Sinner in this quarterfinal, right? So here, in front of you, you have the you have the draw for Yannick Sinner. It looks pretty straightforward for the first week at least. As it goes on, of course, it gets more and more challenging. So the first round is against Altmaier, which you should back Yannick to come out on top. The second round is Pedro Martinez, or a lucky loser. It doesn't matter. Whoever it is, Yannick should be the massive favorite. In the third round, he goes up against Nakashima. if I remember right, Brandon Nakashima was on a really good streak a year ago or something. I was actually in 2021, I was in Florida. And like there was this whole Nakashima, Nishikori, Yannick Sinner, and I think it was Taylor Fritz, I can't quite say. So I think there was this whole City Open uh, where Yannick Sinner was doing well with Nakashima, and like I think they faced off. Not really sure. Um, Yannick Sinner is one of the favorites to definitely make the second week until you see that fourth round against Hubi Hurkacz. Hubi Hurkacz is Hubi Hurkacz for the most part has been very understated. I actually, if you go and watch my Wimbledon predictions video, I expected a lot of huge things of Hubi Hurkacz, just like everybody else. But what happened is Hubie crashed out in the first round, so he wasn't really able to fulfill his massive promise in the grass court season, and then in the hard court season, Hurkacz's been all over the place. Really, he's not made many waves. I could be wrong again. If I do remember him beating Kyrgios and making the final of Montreal. So or and and in the final of Montreal, he lost to Carreno, right? Pablo Carreno Busta. So he did have a decent Montreal, but he went ahead and then lost to John Isner. So yeah, in Cincinnati. So Hubi Hurkacz is Hubi Hurkacz is not in. You could say, I mean, nobody seems to be in form in the hard court season. So Hubi Hurkacz, Yannick Sinner is really honestly a toss of a coin. But between in terms of Grand Slam temperament and pedigree, I back Yannick Sinner. I always back Yannick Sinner in these things. If you go back and watch my Wimbledon video, I actually mentioned that he could be on his way to beating Carlos Alcaraz as well. So um, Hurkacz is a very tricky fourth round, but I want to draw your attention to the quarterfinal between Yannick Sinner and potentially Carlos Alcaraz again. So Sinner versus Alcaraz has been all about. Um, People have been calling it the new Nadal versus Djokovic. It's been like it's been a bit interesting. How like Carlos Alcaraz was of course riding the massive hype train before the French Open until Alexander Zverev put an end to it. And after that, Yannick Sinner has beaten him two times, once in Wimbledon and once in Croatia, right? So you would think that because he won the last two matches, Yannick Sinner is the favorite against Alcaraz. But this is where this is where two things stand out to me. One is the other day, Yannick Sinner was playing a player who was far Felix Auger-Aliassime. Even though like Felix is ahead in the ranking, I would definitely say that um, Yannick Sinner is a better player than Felix Auger-Aliassime. Uh, Despite this, Yannick was, I think he was a set and a break up, and then like he completely pissed away the match from there, and he kind of uncharacteristically lost his cool. I saw the first round of Yannick Sinner versus Thomas Tansi Kokinakis as well in Cincinnati, and for the first time, he seemed a bit rattled for no reason. This guy is ice cold usually, Yannick Sinner, and he didn't seem super comfortable in Cincinnati at all. But traditionally, Cincinnati is actually not a great precursor to the US Open because the courts are slightly faster in Cincinnati. That's why Federer always has performed very well in Cincinnati. And the US Open is a different beast, and you have to back Yannick Sinner to make a deep run in the US Open. But whether he can beat Carlos Alcaraz in the US Open, the last two meetings against Alcaraz, I watched it very closely. I've always been a huge fan of Yannick Sinner since I saw him play Rafael Nadal in French Open 2020. That's when he first caught my eye. I think he nearly won the first set before Rafa took over. But between him and Alcaraz, he's made it a backhand to backhand contest, and he has. If you make it a forehand to forehand contest, there's no doubt that Alcaraz will win. Alcaraz has the better serve, but Sinner has the better backhand. So the last two matches, he's been able to make it a backhand to backhand contest, and he's been able to come out on top. But I think it's about time players like Alcaraz don't stay down forever. So I think his run will end against Alcaraz if you put a gun to my head, right? Um, let's say he does beat Alcaraz, what does he have next? It's going to be the Rafael Nadal train or Cameron Norrie or Rublev. Even as I say it, I don't believe that believe that it'll be anyone other than Rafael Nadal on the other side. I don't think honestly Yannick Sinner is in a place to beat Rafa, especially if Rafa has already got into the semifinal, right? So it's a tricky one. So let's say he does get past that. Can he beat the big two of Medvedev or Tsitsipas? He's struggled a lot against them in the past. But in the last year, Yannick has made a lot of strides, and you have to ask yourself if he's taken out Alcaraz, taken out Nadal. There are two ways you could look at it. One way you could say he's taken out Rafa and he's taken out Alcaraz already. So should be a formality that he beats Tsitsipas and Medvedev, right? But actually, no. The other way to look at it is that he could be super tired after those two grueling matches. So if he is to win the title, can he beat Alcaraz? Actually, when you can even go further than that, can he beat Hurkacz, Alcaraz, Nadal, and Medvedev back to back to back to back? It becomes a bit too much for me. For me, that's why Yannick Sinner is, despite being one of my favorite players, is kind of low down in this list. And I will say that he will be a U.S. Open champion someday for sure. His game style really suits the hard courts. He's a multi-court player. He seemed very comfortable on clay as well, from what I saw. And from he's one for the future, but I don't think 2022 is going to be a Yannick Sinner U.S. Open year. If it is, you can clip this video and quote me. But unfortunately, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be the year for Yannick Sinner. The fourth contender, the man fourth most likely to win it, is uh, in my opinion, is his partner in crime, or his promising talent in crime, Carlos Alcaraz. Carlos Alcaraz has is a weird one, right? Like, so start of the year, wins Miami, does great in Indian Wells, like comes to Madrid, destroys Djokovic, Nadal, and Zverev back to back to back, or was it Nadal, Djokovic, and Zverev? Like, I just remember that it was all three of them back to back to back. Where especially against Alexander Zverev, the sleep deprived Zverev got completely taken apart in the final. Um, Carlos, Carlos definitely a is a massive threat uh, in the U.S. Open as well. His game is of course like all suited. Let me just look up his road. Let's see if I can remember his road. Because I did watch him very closely. He lost to Cam Norrie for sure in Cincinnati. I forgot what happened to him in Montreal. Let me see if I can recall. Uh, because I did watch that. Oh, yeah, he lost to Tommy Paul. I remember this. He was completely cruising against Tommy Paul. He was 3-1 up. He looks to his box, fist bumps, and then he goes ahead and loses to Tommy Paul from there. A similar thing happened against Cam Norrie. He completely was. There was this insane point he won. It was like replayed a million times, like as most Alcaraz points are. And then good old Cam Norrie just very very silently took him out of Cincinnati. So not a great preparation for Alcaraz with respect to his post Wimbledon slump, you could call it. Not a slump, like he's just 19 years old after all, but compared to the likes of Nadal and Djokovic in years past, or Federer for that matter, people who just come in, win Montreal, Cincinnati, and the U.S. Open. I think those days are kind of gone, especially with this amazing crop of hardcore players these days, right? So for Alcaraz, the road has been rocky since his great run. After Madrid, he didn't play Rome. In French Open, Zverev was really angry about the hype. I remember Zverev's sound bites about Alcaraz, and like he came out and beat Alcaraz in the quarterfinal, making it a backhand to backhand contest. In Wimbledon, fourth round, again Yannick Sinner made it a backhand to backhand contest and took out Alcaraz. In Canada and Montreal, as I said, like it was Tommy Paul. And in Cincinnati, I actually watched this one like very closely against Cam Norrie. He was the game of Cam Norrie, which is like a lot of tricky balls, like which didn't have as much pace on them as a Nadal or Djokovic. It kind of disrupted Alcaraz's rhythm. He did come pretty unstuck in that last set. Not gonna lie. So his temperament has, again, like this is what, when somebody calls somebody the next Nadal or next Djokovic or next Federer, it's about these players have been in these kind of situations so many times, and they have always recovered from all sorts of scenarios. And everybody before even Alcaraz experienced his first setback or his first, let's say, difficulty, they were kind of like hyping Alcaraz to be the second coming, and unfortunately for them, he's proven to be a 19-year-old human being that he is. And these are parts of a career. This is not to say that Alcaraz cannot succeed straight away in the US Open, but this is a part of a great career. You gotta like go through downs before you can coast through ups. Not everybody can. Even the great Rafael Nadal couldn't keep winning forever, right? Because he won the French Open straight off the bat when he was 18 or 19 or something ridiculous like that in 2005, and he couldn't like really keep the same intensity, right? So even Nadal went through a dip. So my point is that Alcaraz is, despite all his great qualities, in he's been like found wanting in the last few tournaments, and his draw here looks, oh my God, this is one of the toughest draws I've seen. In the first round, he faces Baez. For those of you who don't know, Baez is a very promising next gen player. This is going to be, you would back Alcaraz to win because Baez is still not quite there physically with respect to Alcaraz. So you'd back Alcaraz to win, but it won't be an easy match. Second round is against Korea. Korea is like Federico Korea. It's not Guillermo Korea for all the uh, old timers. It's Federico Correa. Federico Correa is pretty decent. Borna Koric in the third round could be one of the best matches of the tournament. Borna Koric, for those who have been living under a rock for the last week, Borna Koric has been on absolute fire in Cincinnati. He beat up um, he beat up Nadal, and then he beat Tsitsipas, and he also beat like somebody so he beat Nadal in the first round. He beat Tsitsipas in the final. He beat like uh, pretty pretty impressive players. I think he beat Cam Norrie after Cam Norrie beat Alcaraz. I think that was a run for Borna Choric. So Borna Choric is going to be one hell of a matchup, especially if Borna gets his backhand going like he did in Cincinnati. I can even see him take out Alcaraz because Borna was one of the OG next gen. He's just 25 years old, Borna Choric. He's about like 25, 26 years old. He's the same generation as Daniel Medvedev. He's had like a lot of injury problems. I actually happen to have an autograph of Borna Choric. So I used to go to this tournament called the Chennai Open in 2000. I think it was 2012 or 13 when Choric used to play there as a kid. He was 18 or 19. He was like, even then, he was seen as a big prospect. It was a 250 tournament. I kind of like hung back in the court and got Chart's autograph. So I could be a biased human being because I've actually met the guy, right? But Borna versus Carlos on their best days, it's actually like anybody's matchup, right? But let's say he does get past Borna Choric. Then he faces Marin Cilic, Borna Choric's countryman, or Dan Evans. Marin Cilic is has been a pest at Grand Slams this year. In French Open, he unexpectedly reached the semifinal before falling to Casper Ruud, if I remember right. And in Wimbledon, he had to pull out of COVID. But like Marin Cilic is, at the end of the day, a former U.S. Open champion. He's one of the few U.S. Open champions who's still playing, right? So Marin Cilic um, against Alcaraz, you would back Alcaraz. I even think they played recently, if I'm not wrong, in Cincinnati. Let me verify that claim. I'm pretty sure they did play in Cincinnati, and I think it was Cilic. Yeah, 7-6-6-1. Yeah, I was right. So Alcaraz would beat Cilic normally, but Dan Evans could be a very annoying customer. He slices a lot, as you know. But I think Dan Evans' strength is also Carlos Alcaraz's strength, which is forehand to forehand. So you'd expect Alcaraz to blow Dan Evans away. And then comes the aforementioned clash between Yannick Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz. I actually, funnily enough, I think it's Alcaraz's game to win because Alcaraz has lost to Sinner two times. Usually in these head-to-heads of equal players, you'll see that, hey, if one player gets a win, the other one also gets a win back. So I think it's about time that Alcaraz got a win over Sinner. Then comes the big clash between himself and Rafael Nadal. Between Alcaraz and Nadal, you gotta back Rafa uh, for this year at least. But if Alcaraz is already on a roll after beating Sinner and let's say after beating Sinner and Nadal, sorry, Sinner and Cilic. I'm really sorry. I don't know why it says Cilic or Alcaraz for Alcaraz, but yeah, if he beats Cilic or Sinner, then he's going to take on Nadal, and he will be on a hot streak. If he's already beaten Sebastian Baez, if he's already beaten Coria, Borna Koric, Marin Cilic, and Yannick Sinner, you gotta maybe like uh, maybe start looking at the possibility that this is Alcaraz's year. And if he does face Tsitsipas in the final, he has a massive advantage over Tsitsipas, given how they match up. And between him and Daniil Medvedev, you would back, you would back, you would back Medvedev normally. But then again, I wouldn't be surprised if Alcaraz is in such a hot run, he would potentially take out Daniil Medvedev as well. About what I think will happen, I think he will perhaps fall to Nadal after beating Sinner. That's what I think will happen, but it remains to be seen. Moving to the third contender is this guy, Stefanos Tsitsipas, the most one of the most controversial players of all time. Stefanos is okay. That was a massive overstatement. Forgive me. But like he's one of one of the bad boys of tennis, but he wants to be known as the philosopher of tennis, right? So it's really funny how Tsitsipas is perceived versus how he thinks he's perceived. Stefanos on in terms of tournaments, I remember him. I remember him completely crashing to Kyrgios in Wimbledon, and in Montreal he randomly lost to Jack Draper, and then he got hit by the Chorich train in Cincinnati in the final of Cincinnati in a match that, if I'm not wrong, he won the first set, and I kind of expect no, he didn't win the first set actually. He won, like, I think he was 3 or 4 nil up, and I was like, okay, Tsitsipas got this, and I switched it off. And then like a while back, I came back like I think I was actually traveling, so when I got back, it was like Chorich had brought the first set to a tiebreak, and between him and Stefanos, I was surprised to see how they matched up, and that Pete Chorich actually was able to beat Tsitsipas. The problem I find with Tsitsipas is that in his head, he thinks he is he's already got a divine right to win. That's the problem I see with Tsitsipas. Technically speaking, his forehand is like the best in the world, probably. Okay, probably Nadal and Alcaraz match up, but like in terms when I think about the best forehands in the game, Carlos Alcaraz. I mean, like Stefanos Tsitsipas is right there with Carlos Alcaraz and Rafael Nadal. That might have been one of the best Freudian slips ever, right? So between him and Alcaraz, and Nadal, they have one of the best forehands. In terms of backhand, his backhand has been sliced. He doesn't slice as much, etc., etc. But he's kind of covering it up in the hardcourt season with some good serve and volley tennis. I remember this classic clash between him and Alcaraz last year. Uh, it was probably the fourth round of the quarterfinal, and he was taken out. He was taken out by Alcaraz last year, and he's not had. They call it the Tsitsipas U.S. Open curse. He's never actually been very good at the U.S. Open, right? So it's traditionally been one of his worst tournaments. It's because the court is slower than Cincinnati, where he really likes it. He's made the final of last two Cincinnati, if I remember, because he lost a very classic match to Zverev the previous year. So Tsitsipas loves Cincinnati. He usually does well in Cincinnati, and then he comes and crashes in the U.S. Open. So between all of them, and then looking at his draw here, he plays a lucky loser in the first round. In the second round, he plays Lorenzo Sonego, the owner of the most annoying grunt in all of tennis. Um, Sonego versus Tsitsipas, you would have to back Stefanos, but Stefanos loses these weird matches. But I don't think he will lose to Sonego. Maxime Cressy or Brandon, not Brandon Nishioka. Nishioka is not. I'm sorry, I got him confused with Nakashima. But Nishioka and Maxime Cressy versus Stefano Nishioka and Maxime Cressy, or Maxime Cressy versus Stefanos Tsitsipas is going to be an interesting match. Nishioka did very well in the City Washington Open. I actually watched that pretty extensively. He played the final with Kyrgios. Before that, he beat Andre Rublev. So he's been on a flow, right? Nishioka. So Nishioka is a glorified pusher, I would say. He just keeps the ball in. You could easily see Tsitsipas getting really frustrated with Nishioka, but I would, if it's Cressy, it's going to be serve and volley Cressy versus serve. Tsitsipas has been doing the serve and volley to cover up his backhand recently. So serve volley Tsitsipas versus serve volley Cressy. I have to back serve volley Tsitsipas, right? Because Tsitsipas is just a better player. Tsitsipas Baratini in Wimbledon, I would call it a close match. In US Open, you would think that Tsitsipas' quality would shine out. Taylor Fritz, Casper Ruud, or Botic van den Janschulp. I really can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry. Between Botic, Ruud, and Fritz, is quarterfinal opponent for Tsitsipas. Casper Ruud is one of those people who is deceptively good on hard courts. Casper Ruud could very easily knock out Tsitsipas if he gets there, but I think Taylor Fritz is going to knock out Casper Ruud. So Taylor Fritz versus Tsitsipas is a very, very tough matchup. Taylor Fritz has been one of the best players this year. I've been watching him very closely. He's actually played superbly. So Taylor Fritz is going to be a huge challenge for Stefanos, especially in the USA. Fritz plays like he gets like even more geared up, and it's also there's an interesting narrative because Taylor Fritz has been very outspoken against the coaching rule, and Tsitsipas has been very for the coaching rule. So it'll be very interesting in that match to see whether goes Fritz's frustration at the coaching that Tsitsipas receives. Coaching is now legal. Whether that will be like apparent and whether there'll be a chip on the shoulder of Fritz, who will be very determined to beat Stefanos to send out a message, right? And then there'll be the classic Stefanil semifinal between Medvedev and Tsitsipas. Normally, Medvedev has owned Tsitsipas, right? But in Cincinnati, Tsitsipas switched up to a serve and volley, just like Djokovic did in Paris Masters last year, and Medvedev had no answer to it, right? But people like Daniil Medvedev, in a fast court, Tsitsipas got away with it. The question is, in a slower court, whether Medvedev's ascension over or his psychological edge over Tsitsipas comes back or not. A confident Stefanos Tsitsipas is one of the hardest players to beat, given how comprehensively he beat Daniil in 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 the U.S. Open. You were in Cincinnati. You would expect Tsitsipas. You would expect it to be a 50-50 call, but if you ask me, I still think Medvedev. The conditions in U.S. Open would favor Medvedev a lot more. And also, Medvedev has a better big game mentality, but that's just my opinion. And if he does reach the final, he has to play in that his three worst nightmares, I would call two worst nightmares on Yannick Sinner, because Yannick Sinner, he's traditionally beaten, even though I think Yannick Sinner should be starting to get the better of Tsitsipas very soon. But Nadal and Alcaraz completely dominate Tsitsipas usually. They just get on his backhand and completely dominate it, which Yannick Sinner should really be following as well. Overall, I think Stefanos is not likely to win the U.S. Open. If you were to ask me again, I think Taylor Fritz is going to take him out in the quarterfinal. Um, and if he does beat him, I don't see Tsitsipas beating Daniel and then Nadal. So I would say with fair certainty that Tsitsipas is, even though he's one of the contenders, he's of course the world number 3 or 4 or something, and I have to put him in one of the contenders. It's very difficult to see him beat back to back to back Fritz, Medvedev, and Nadal. So I would say he will lose to Fritz. That's my prediction. Now let's move to the next contender, the defending champion, the world number one. It's ridiculous that he is actually the second most likely to win this, but the man himself, the legend, Daniil Medvedev. Daniil Medvedev has been very, very frustrated with what's going on in the world, right? He, for no fault of his own, was for no fault of his own, and he's been like ostracized for being from Russia. So this means that Medvedev has not really had a great year. First, he had hernia. He kind of was very limited in the clay season. He just played Roland Garros. From what I remember, he played a pre-Roland Garros event, and then he played Roland Garros, and he lost to Marin Cilic in that horrible match. In Wimbledon, I mean, in the grass court season rather, I remember he lost a final to Tim van Rijthoven in the Dutch tournament in grass. He didn't win Halle either. I think he lost to Hurkacz. And then he couldn't quite play Wimbledon. And then like after that, I kind of expected him to sweep everything. He went to Mexico. I think it was called Las Cabos Open. He beat Cam Norrie in the final there. So I thought, okay, Daniel is back. And then he goes and loses in Montreal to Kyrgios in the first round, first match that he played. I think it was technically the second round, right? That was like super, super confusing to me. From there, he flew straight to Cincinnati, and in Cincinnati, he then lost to Stefanos in the aforementioned serve volley match. So Daniel has been having such a choppy year and such a choppy build up to the US Open. But then, when you think about it, he is the defending champion. The defending champion or not, Medvedev's game suits the US Open a lot more than anything else. If you remember the 2019 hardcourt swing, he completely was a form player. He came into, he's very consistent in the US Open. In 2019, he reached the final, losing that memorable final to Nadal. In 2020, I remember Dominic Thiem was on a roll. It was COVID, and like all the stadiums were closed. All the stadiums were there were no people in the stadiums. Like basically, it was behind closed doors. And in that match, Medvedev got destroyed by Team. It was like one of the weirdest matches of all time I've seen. Medvedev had no answers to Team's game. Team can do that to anybody, right? And then 2021, I actually flew all the way to New York City, paid like $600 tickets for my dad and me. I wanted to witness history, watch Novak Djokovic, Pete Federer, and Nadal at the time, and win 21 Grand Slams and the calendar Grand Slam at the same time for the first time in forever, and probably forever in my lifetime. And then this man turned up, just flipped the script, thrashed Djokovic 6-4, 6-4, 6-4, winning the U.S. Open. Post with a picture that you see. I do have like pictures of him in my phone, like during the trophy ceremony and so on. So it's like it was it's one of the matches that I'll never forget. Medvedev was flawless that day. I watched it in flesh and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It was somebody who was serving like Isner and then playing like Djokovic, and it was just untouchable. Often use that to describe Zverev, because when Zverev is in full flow, he plays like Djokovic and he serves like Isner, right? But Medvedev that day was untouchable by Djokovic, right? So Daniil Daniil has always been very very hard to beat in the U.S. Open. Like it needed like one of the best performances of Nadal's career to beat him in the final, and then one of the best performances of Dominic Thiem's career to beat him in the final. So last 3 years, either he wins the title or somebody who beats him wins the title. This year, let's look at his draw. Stefan Kozlov, he should brush him aside. Arthur Rinderknech, he should beat him as well. I remember Arthur having like a mini decent run in French Open a while back. I think it was a couple of years ago. He's not been relevant for a while, so Medvedev should be able to beat him. Nicolas Basilashvili is a funny one. Nicolas Basilashvili last year in the delayed Indian Wells, which was played like after the US Open, weirdly enough, Nicolas Basilashvili came to the final. He lost to Cam Norrie. I remember that match being one of the at the time like one of the weirdest Masters 1000 final. Little did we know that we're going to get finals like Batista Agut versus Carreno Busta versus Hurkacz, or like Chorich winning a Masters 1000, right? Like in 2022. But 2021, when Basilashvili reached Indian Wells final, it was a big deal. And Basilashvili, this is to say that Basilashvili in an American hardcourt is pretty good, right? But he's not Daniil Medvedev. Come on, like Daniil Medvedev can blow him off the court. Talking about people blowing people off the court, Roberto Bautista Agut is a steady Eddie, but his potential fourth round opponent could be Nick freaking Kyrgios. Kyrgios has been like tearing up scripts. There used to be a saying that if Kyrgios figures out consistency, the rest of the world will regret it. Kyrgios kind of seems to have figured out consistency, but it also remains to be seen whether he can match the world number one. Fool me once, shame on you, etc. So he did take out Daniil Medvedev um, in Montreal, but you expect Medvedev to be a problem solver. You expect him to go back to the drawing board. Expect him to figure out how to outlast Kyrgios, right? So I remember that match between Kyrgios and Medvedev. I think Daniil basically won the first set in a tiebreak, and then Kyrgios was able to turn the tables, which I was very surprised by, because I expected Medvedev to. I expected Medvedev to. No, 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 it was actually no, no. Medvedev was winning the tiebreak, and then Kyrgios won the tiebreak, and then Kyrgios won the second set very easily. Let me quickly check that, because from what I remember, it was a very close tiebreak. Um, and no, Medvedev won the first tiebreak. Oh, that's interesting. Medvedev won the first tiebreak. Kyrgios won a close second set, 6-4. And then I remember the last set being a blowout because I was just like working or something, and then I look at the screen and 20 minutes the match was over. So the last set was a blowout by Kyrgios. And it was very uncharacteristic because when you associate Medvedev with fitness and Kyrgios with temperamental short bursts, but it was the that match was the reverse. So he could. I don't think over 5 sets, Daniel Medvedev is going to lose to Nick Kyrgios. Famous last words. But let's move on. In the quarterfinal, he faces Felix, Draper, or Kachanov. If Draper reaches all the way to the quarterfinal, I'll be very surprised. But I just put him there because Draper's been having a good run in Winston-Salem, and I do have some recency bias. He's going to take out all three of them. He completely wiped the floor with Felix in the last year's semifinal. I was actually in New York for that as well. And he's always had the wood over Kachanov. He's always going to be the favorite against Draper, even though Draper's a lefty, and like he's had trouble against Nadal before Medvedev. Uh, but I don't think it's going to happen this time, right? So he's going to like brush aside any of the quarterfinal opponents. In terms of semifinals, Stefanos Tsitsipas versus Daniel Medvedev. Normally, you would back Medvedev 10 times out of 10 in a US Open hardcourt, but Cincinnati being what it was, um, like Tsitsipas figuring out how to serve and volley and like this entire trend of serve and volley against Daniel Medvedev, people are trying to do this, but the slower pace of the US Open court and his traditional edge over Tsitsipas mentally, I would still back Daniel Medvedev. And in the final, Rafael Nadal, Carlos Alcaraz, and Yannick Sinner. Medvedev versus Alcaraz is a match I really like to see. I have no idea how it would go. I would back Medvedev because the two people who have beaten Alcaraz in big matches this year, um, which is Alexander Zverev in French Open and Yannick Sinner in Wimbledon, both have one of the best backhands in the world. Who's the other guy who has? I mean, other than of course you know who. Other than him, like who has the best backhand in the world? Daniel Medvedev, and I would back Daniel Medvedev to make it a backhand to backhand contest with us versus Carlos Alcaraz. Against Rafael Nadal, it's really funny. The Australian Open final was absolutely heartbreaking. People say that Medvedev has not been the same since. And also, there's this whole thing with the US Open 2019, where that was another classic fight. Nadal Medvedev matches have been very close matchups, but it has gone to Nadal both times. There are two ways to look at it. You can just look at it and say, hey, yeah, Rafael Nadal has the mental edge over Medvedev. But you could also look at it, flip it aside and say, look at last year, what happened. In the Australian Open final, Novak Djokovic completely thrashed Medvedev in straight sets, put on a masterclass. He comes to New York City, Medvedev flips the table around, puts on a masterclass to the entire watching public's complete silence, right? So it's in fact like people were actively jeering him as he was serving for the match and everything. So it was like very, very interesting how much mental fortitude Medvedev had there to keep it together, but he was not losing the match that day. So out of all this, I would say that that said, like Nadal Medvedev is still a 50-50. Close matches are close matches. Medvedev is a really mentally strong guy. If he gets the opportunity to redeem himself against Nadal, how do you redeem yourself from a bad loss? You go out there and beat the same guy again in a big match. So that match, I would call it 50-50. So that looks like Medvedev's path to the title. Uh, Moving on. And finally, we reach the most likely person, I mean, like in terms of draw, etc., to win the title. The man, the myth, the legend, the absolute icon of the game, probably one of the greatest, probably the greatest player of all time, definitely among the top three greatest players of all time, Rafael Nadal Pereira. So Nadal has been completely dominant this year in Grand Slam tennis. He won the Australian Open to everybody's surprise. He won the French Open to nobody's surprise. And then in Wimbledon, he reached the semifinal before he pulled out after an epic match with Taylor Fritz. He had this abdominal injury. He's been nursing a foot the whole year with a nerve ending that has been numb for pain. Like this man is going through hell to play tennis. He's reached the final he reached the semifinal of Wimbledon, and then he went away for a while. Who would you blame him? He went away from tennis for a while, came back in Cincinnati, and was caught in a very interesting match tussle against Borna Coric, who kind of decided to turn into a mini Novak Djokovic that day and take him out. So, in terms of that, Nadal has um, had a great year, but uh, Nadal has had a great year in tennis, but like recently he doesn't have much tennis. Slash, the only match he played against Borna Coric, he didn't win. So in the hard court season, so he doesn't. You don't have a lot of data to do how Rafa is doing, but you have 20 years of data to know how Rafa does generally in Grand Slam tennis, right? He just turns up for the big moments. Four-time US Open champion, 2000, 2000, let me recall, 2010, 2013, 2017, and 2019. So 13, 17, 19. And like he hasn't won it for the last 3 years, but like, I mean, he has not even played. I don't think he played 20. I don't think he played 21. I remember in 20, he considered it too much to travel during COVID, and he just skipped the US Open. And in 21, he skipped it because of injury as well. So Nadal has not played really since his last title win. So I guess like this is the first time. I think the last match he lost was to Lucas Pouille in 2016 because I don't think he played in 2018 when Djokovic won it either. So Nadal has not lost. The other way to look at it is Nadal has not lost a match in the US Open since Lucas Pouille beat him in 2016. That's a long time ago, right? So now let's look at his draw, right? There's no when it comes to Nadal, Djokovic, or Federer, there's no point like talking about logic. You'd expect them to do something, then they'd go ahead and like win anyway. So let's just look at the draw. Hichkata, he's going to blow away. Fognini, he's going to beat him with some interest to pay because of how much beef there's been between Fognini and Nadal traditionally. Kekmanovic, who was the beneficiary of Novak Djokovic's unfortunate circumstances with the U.S. Open, Kekmanovic got the 32nd seed, but he's been seeded straight to face Nadal, so I don't know how much of a blessing that was. Kekmanovic, Nadal, you're going back Nadal. Tiafoe, Nadal, there's no question. Rublev or Nori are not going to get close to Rafael Nadal in the US Open in a quarterfinal over 5 sets, right? And then comes Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner, or Marin Cilic. I just put in Marin Cilic out of respect for his previous achievement of being the US Open champion, but like in all probability, it's going to be a toss up between Alcaraz or Sinner on who faces Nadal. With Alcaraz, between the two of them, I would say Alcaraz has the higher probability of beating Nadal because I don't know. Nadal Sinner, I don't see Sinner beating Nadal over 5 sets yet because Sinner doesn't have the consistency of service needed to trouble somebody like Rafael Nadal in the US Open in a Grand Slam semifinal over 5 sets. So I would say Carlos Alcaraz is Nadal's biggest banana skin. Uh, and in the final, if he faces Tsitsipas, I would back Rafa to blow Tsitsipas away out of the court and just win the US Open again and slam number 23, right? 23, yes. That's mind boggling to think how much he has won. And this would be his fifth US Open to match Roger Federer and two above Djokovic. That's insane for the so called clay court specialist. But if he does face Daniil Medvedev, I've already talked about it when I was talking about Medvedev. They have this interesting dynamic going on where Rafa has the upper hand. But Daniil Medvedev did beat Djokovic in the US Open after losing to Djokovic in the Australian Open final. So there is that thing to look forward to. So I will hold back on what I think will happen till the next thing that I talk about, which is calling upsets or things to look out for. Missing star power. Let's start with you know who, the 21-time Grand Slam champion, missing because of reasons due to immigration. I don't want to comment on the subject. I have my own views, which I'll keep to myself. It's a pity that Novak Djokovic is not playing one reason or the other, and tennis is poorer for it. Um, with respect to the other missing elephant in the room, Roger Federer, he's coming back right after this in the Laver Cup, is what we are hearing, but he's not playing the U.S. Open. One of the biggest stars missing is also Alexander Zverev due to his knee injury in ankle injury in French Open semifinal against Nadal. So that's a pity as well because Zverev is one of the most consistent performers in the U.S. Open in the last 2 years. He reached the final in 2020, um, played a memorable semifinal last year against Djokovic. So Zverev not being here also hurts a lot. In terms of early upsets, I got Shapovalov losing to Husler. Husler just made the Winston-Salem semifinal. If I'm not wrong, he beat Jack Draper. So Husler's in good form. Shapovalov is Shapovalov. So I expect Husler to take out Shapovalov. Felix Auger-Aliassime might probably be the worst top 10 player I've ever seen. I never ever rely on Felix. Now I often have a saying that don't ever rely on Felix. So Felix losing is something I have on the bingo card as well. Grigor Dimitrov's injury problems. He pulled out of a match against Dominic Thiem in Winston-Salem. And against he has a very tricky first round against American Steve Johnson. And finally, Hubi Hurkacz has Adrian Manarino, probably the most annoying player in all of tennis, right? So Adrian Manarino is could take out Hubi Hurkacz. That's one of the upsets to look out for. My biggest highlight of this US Open is going to be the third round. The number of amazing matches in the third round blew my mind. I just looked at the potential third rounds. Each of these matches could be five-set classics. Look at this. Fritz versus Bodic van den Zulp. Fritz is a great player. Bodic reached the quarterfinal before losing to, or fourth round before losing to Medvedev last year, right? He took a set off Medvedev. Was it the quarterfinal? Yeah, it was the quarterfinal because the semifinal for Medvedev was Felix last year. But Bodic had this great run. So Bodic in the US Open is really good. Taylor Fritz has been in great form. So Taylor Fritz versus Bodic is going to be a classic. Felix Kachanov, needless to say, Kachanov can go on these runs. Felix is I don't know what to say about Felix. I haven't rated him ever, but he did reach a US Open semifinal. So Felix Kachanov and Felix is top 10. So Felix versus Kachanov is going to be one of the best matches. Andy Murray has actually like a favorable draw for the first two rounds. And then he will come up against Mateo Baratini. You would expect Baratini to make short work of Andy as he did in the grass court season. But at the same time, it's a former US Open champion against Baratini, right? Sebi Korda, Sebi Korda versus Tommy Paul in the second round is one of the most insane clashes I've seen. Both are like equally good, in my opinion. And Korda versus Paul is going to be a long, long match. And the winner playing Van Rijthoven is going to be another long match because Van Rijthoven is has been one of the foreign players this season. Him playing against Sebi Korda is going to be for going on forever. Marin Cilic, Dan Evans, be my guest and pick one, right? Marin Cilic could like is a former US Open champion. On his day, he will blow somebody like Dan Evans away. But Dan Evans is like that annoying pest who doesn't go away. On his day, Dan Evans in turn can blow anybody away. I was watching Dan Evans play in against Pablo Carreno Busta in Montreal, and Dan Evans nearly beat Carreno Busta, who went on to win the title by beating Hubie Hurkacz, right? Actually, I haven't talked a lot about Carreno Busta, the champion from Montreal. He actually plays Dominic Thiem in the first round. I actually forgot his draw, but like um, Pablo Carreno Busta, I think he runs into one of the big ones, like somebody like I wonder why he I didn't see Carreno Busta in any of those draws. That's weird because Carreno Busta is one of the contenders for sure. And then Rublev versus Shapovalov is going to be if Shapovalov makes it through Husler and let's say he reaches the third round, he has to face Andrei Rublev. So Rublev versus Shapovalov is going to be one of the most intense clashes I've seen, both in terms of tennis and in terms of temperament. And then Frances Tiafoe versus Diego Schwartzman has a five-setter written all over it. So I've actually picked Tiafoe to upset Schwartzman and face Nadal in the fourth round. So um, then there's the What's Wrong Club to observe. Andrei Rublev and Matteo Berrettini, Dimitrov, and team head that. Team has not been the same since his wrist injury. He doesn't have the confidence to go for his shots. He's probably going to lose to Carreno Busta in the first round, right? So Dominic Team, I wonder what's wrong with him. Dimitrov has again gone back to playing very inconsistently, and also he got injured in the first. To be fair to him, against Dominic Team and Winston Salem, so Dimitrov is probably going to be out in the first week. Matteo Berrettini, I expected him to win the title at Wimbledon. You can go and watch the video. I look like an utter clown now, but like at the time, I expected Berrettini to win the title at Wimbledon. But like Berrettini's COVID diagnosis before Wimbledon put a stop to that. He's been terrible in the hardcourt season. He lost to Carreno Busta in Montreal. I think he lost like in straight sets, and then he lost in Cincinnati pretty early as well. Andrei Rublev has completely lost the plot. I watched him the other day against Nishioka in the semifinal of City Open, and he kept punching the racket after like missing one shot in the first set or something. So Rublev has been like completely out of the blue as well. And finally, the Watts Cooking Club are the people who are playing well. Pablo Carreno Busta is playing amazingly. Borna Choric has just Pablo Carreno Busta and Choric have won the two Masters thousands, right? Montreal and Cincinnati. So you've got to watch out for them. Cam Norrie is so quiet, but he's so effective. And then Dan Evans is like Cam Norrie's right-handed when he's also gets on with the game. You never understand why they're winning, but they do win matches. So they're going to make probably fourth round quarterfinal around there. It'll be interesting. I think Norrie could even make the semifinal for all I know. Um, oh no, Norrie has a quarterfinal against Nadal, so he's probably not making the semifinal. And then there's Husler and Ben Shelton. Ben Shelton is a NCAA athlete turned pro, so he is somebody to watch out for as well. And finally, the last thing to look forward to is Daniel's role reversal attempt 2.0. So what I mean by that is 2021 loses the Australian Open final. Djokovic beats Djokovic in the 2021 US Open final. Can he do the same to Nadal in the 2022 US Open final after losing to Nadal in the Australian Open final? No defending champion has won for 14 years. If I remember right, I'm going to recite 2007 was Federer, 2008 was Federer. That was the last time somebody defended it. I think Federer won it from 2004 to 2008. But 2009 was Del Potro, 2010 was Nadal, 2011 was Djokovic, 2012 was Murray, 2013 was Nadal, 2014 was Cilic, 2015 was Djokovic, 2016 was Wawrinka, 2017 was Nadal, 2018 Djokovic, 2019 Nadal, 2020 team, 2021 Medvedev. So as you can see, the US Open has never been defended successfully in 14 years until my prediction, I'm going to go ahead and say it. Daniel Medvedev is going to defend the US Open, is going to hold up two fingers to the Lawn Tennis Association of England, All England Lawn Tennis Association, for not letting him play Wimbledon. I think he's going to avenge his defeat against Nadal. We're going to see another classic Nadal Medvedev final. And I think players like Medvedev, you cannot keep them down forever. They're not going to lose three finals back to back to back. Call this a jinx, call this anything you want. My prediction for the US Open 2022 is Daniil Medvedev is going to go and silence the crowd just like he did last year against Djokovic. This time he's going to do it against Nadal and stop Grand Slam 23 and win the US Open and be the first man in 14 years to defend the US Open title. Picking the defending champion and world number one is boring, but also in this case, it's actually a brave pick because everybody and their dog after the draw is picking Nadal. But I'm going to pick Medvedev. Let's see what happens. Stay tuned. Thank you.